So I think what we got also as introduction is that I think we are at maybe a tipping point even in life sciences and health research, right? So we have this observation of biology at multiple scales. This is sort of working out now, and our experimental partners come up with more and more techniques to do so. But I think we can now maybe more even start simulating, maybe even engineering it, right? So I think now is maybe the time to sort of get into the value chain. What we want to do today is maybe trace really the arc from very sort of fundamental, maybe even protein or sort of intercellular biology up through the various levels from the software paradigm up to really clinical and also pharma type of applications. So I think our panel really represents many links in that exciting chain. Thank you very much for being with us here, and let's dive right in. So what I would be interested maybe first is really like how I could maybe really work as this connective tissue between these sort of multi-scales that we want that we have here. And let's maybe start from over there with Petra. Not just as director as one of the directors at the Max Planck Institute here for biochemistry in Munich, but also as a pioneer in synthetic biology. I would say you work on potentially maybe the smallest scale that sort of really then impacts here. But biologics, big thing of course in pharma as well. Synthetic membranes and protein design. How would AI help you sort of navigate that, and what's the impact that it's having now, and where it would be going?
Yeah, well, it's a bit ironic that I start being as far away from the patient as you could possibly be. The point is that we're working with proteins, and proteins are really the essential elements that determine what life is. Everything that happens in a cell is basically guided by proteins. They are really amazing machines, super complicated, super complex, and most things that go wrong in cells also go wrong because of proteins. And so we have been interested in how proteins actually determine the very phenomenon of life. So my research is really how can we build minimal life based on a minimal number of proteins. And the protein research has been sitting on the most amazing curated data for decades. And that is the protein database, the structure database, because the structure of proteins determine what they do. And this amazing database that has been fed by thousands and thousands of research labs all over the world has been the basis for AlphaFold's success. So AlphaFold is as you probably all know, the Nobel awarded application of AI in biology, and it basically allows to determine the structure from the sequence. The sequence is relatively well known since we have sequenced all the genome and mostly know what are the proteins. So that part has been solved. But now, how do we get from the structure to the function if we do not yet know the function? And vice versa, if we want a certain function, could we probably design a structure that just does that? Or if a protein has the wrong function, how would we have to change it to get it to the right function? And that's a very fundamental question. That's the generative AI that basically opens a world of research on protein science. And this is something we are, as many others, also interested in and pursuing. Now, a lot of, I'm closing soon, but a lot of protein activation is based on just binding. And binding is relatively easy to engineer. If you know the structure, you can in principle think of something that fits the structure like a key and a lock. But so much more is not just the binding, but the interactions between many proteins, not just one A and B, but they are all immersed in enormously complex networks all over the cell. And this is something that is very hard to answer in the normal approach, putting something on a cell and see what it does.
So proteins basically as sort of the engines of the cell, and of course also as one of maybe the sort of pivotal examples sort of post and pre-AI moments, everyone in AlphaFold. So we talk about sort of AI as connective tissue. Maybe let's move on to you, Cyriac, right? I would say, by the way, thanks for coming over from Bay Area, where you lead your startup. I think it's still safe to call it Earli. At some point, you need to call it lately then when you grow up.
Hopefully one day.
So I think you sometimes call yourself as sort of using the software approach to biology that I think you really pioneered maybe as idea. Why? Maybe you can sort of give a bit detail on why you sort of maybe specifically sort of use that to program cancer cells.
Well, it starts with a key fundamental problem of cancer. It is now 2026, and how many of you know someone or have someone in their family or friend world that has been affected by cancer? Yeah, it's 2026 and most arms are going up. Why is that? If you took a very simple approach and you asked a very simple question, what's cancer treatment about? The answer would probably be something like kill the bad cells, but don't kill the good cells while you're doing it. And in order to do that, it's a very simple statement. You have to kind of know which one is which, right? And that is the fundamental core problem in cancer treatment. In the last 50 years, pharma companies have spent billions of dollars trying to find what they call natural targets on the outside of cancer cells in order to make them druggable so that their drugs can dock on and kill the cancer cell. The problem is that most of these natural targets are either not available or they keep mutating. And that's why there is no single drug that ever works for all patients. So the idea came up at Stanford University to say, what if we flip the script completely? What if we stopped looking for any of these natural markers? What if we didn't look for these markers that lead to $2.5 billion of drug costs every year, and the smaller and smaller populations that the drug even applies to is then accessible to patients, and it has a 30% response rate? It's not sustainable. So what if instead we made our own markers? What if the cancer cell could become a factory that made its own medicine against itself? So what we're now doing essentially is this. We create genetic switches. These genetic switches are DNA sequences. They get injected intravenously into your body. They go into healthy cells randomly, and if you happen to have cancer cells, it will randomly go into those too. But only inside cancer cells. They switch on like a light switch. And when they do switch on, they then instruct the cancer cell to make any protein that we encode in the DNA sequence, a protein that then gets expressed into the tumor microenvironment. And that protein is then activating the immune system to attack and kill the cancer. In other words, it could be a cytokine, it could be a T-cell engager, it could be an agonist, it could be a combination of those. We can make up to 4 proteins from the same cancer cell. That means we can also address different pathways of cancer. In other words, the T effector cells that kill the cancer initially, those are the soldiers that come and fire. That's great. Unfortunately, they might miss a few cells.
So the AI part here would be to really design those adaptively?
So without AI, Earli wouldn't even exist. Because the problem is we are not even inside the cell only, we're inside the nucleus of the cell. That's where the dysregulation truly happens. That's where the dysregulated master transcription factor binding sites are that you talked about. So in order to find them, to find the right ones, you need a tiny sequence, otherwise you can't get into the cell. The nucleus is 1/50th the size of the cell. The cell is already pretty small. But the size of the pores on the nucleus to get into the nucleus are 1/100th of the nucleus size. So now, in order to get into that thing, you need to be super small. That means you need to select the right combination of transcription factor binding sites, as well as the right spacing and so on. So for that, we needed AI. It was so much data. We went through 20,000 fully sequenced cancer samples of cancer patients. These are not just one cell. Each one has a full genome. So imagine what the data volume is. It was so big that we needed to run 4 of the largest Amazon AWS instances for an entire 30-day month, 24/7, to get through the data a single time. And when we did get through the data, we found a long list of possible culprits that might be the indicator of cancer. In order to drill that down, you need to do the lab in the loop, which is what you described. Somehow you got to test this empirically in the wet lab. So the problem in the wet lab is you usually do about 20 to 50 sequence testings a week. Yeah. Well, if you got about 2 million, you're going to be there in 50 years. So we had to hire a specialist from Texas to come into Earli, who is one of the world's few experts at building massively parallel reporter assays, which now allow us to digitally, not actually digitally, actually DNA-wise barcode every single possible genetic combination. Like a barcode at the store, where each item has its own barcode. We can make 250,000 in one batch at the same time now. Since we started all of that, this was in the days when AI was really uncool in 2018. We've now moved on from machine learning to LLMs.
Been cool much earlier, but maybe I'm having an error.
In 1950, actually. Yeah, that's right. So now we've moved to LLMs and go from analysis of pattern recognition to generative AI, where because essentially DNA is nothing but an alphabet of 4 letters, right? It's text. Yeah. Text is perfect for LLMs. So now we've built a lab in the loop system with the help of Evo2 from Planck Institute, which is great for DNA. It's not right now, not Anthropic or OpenAI or Gemini that are best for DNA, actually. It's quite interesting. So that are building the next sequence, the next promoters, the next genetic switches that are even better. So that's where we are now.
Awesome, thanks, Cyril. This is really exciting, and I think it's a very nice transition from sort of classical, more AI work to the language models. And I think sort of going up the scales, let's stick with sort of treatment first. This was something that you, Anna, have been doing for a while. We actually even have some joint papers, right, sort of looking for some drugs. But I think not just as head of data science at Roche, but also head of, I think, what you now call integrated clinical data analytics. You moved also from drugs to also patient description and even clinical apps, or I think you call it clinical algorithms. Maybe you can tell us a little bit here, not just on the treatment, but also on the sort of observation diagnostics and maybe also longevity or also side, how you see impact of AI.
Yeah. I mean, maybe to make the bridge to what you guys said, I think all of these things you described, we also, of course, try to apply in pharma, right? We want to find the right molecules with the right attributes, right? So we can go very quickly into experiments, into patients, and see whether they work or not. And this is where we also try the lab in the loop approach. That's a joint collaboration between Helmholtz and Roche, for example. So I think it's super exciting. I do believe AI is in all parts of the value chain, from very early understanding the disease, understanding the patient populations, trying to predict what will work in which patient. And now coming to the clinical application, now I've shifted a bit gears and work more on what's already possible today in the hospital. And there we also see all of these technologies, actually. So one, LLMs. We have now put LLMs into our clinical decision support tools that we bring to the physicians in the hospital. Why? Because it actually makes their work so much faster, right? They can get the reports generated, they can drill through all the data they need, for example, in a tumor board to take a decision on next treatment for the patients. So I think it's exciting, but it's a lot of work still to do because these models, it's a new technology, they are highly regulated. We have to have everything highly regulated. So it's a lot of work to actually bring them into the hospital in a large scale. And then you mentioned the clinical algorithms. Yeah. I'm super excited about that because one of the challenges in cancer, for example, is that we don't detect it early enough. So many of the people that die from cancer today is because we actually see it too late, and then all of these treatment and combination treatments actually no longer work. So in order to detect cancer early, one thing we do is we bring clinical algorithms to patients that combine, for example, blood measures with your history, with your clinical history, all sorts of different types of data. And then the AI basically smartly connects it to make a good predictor of, for example, we have one in colon cancer, to do that prediction much earlier, because then people actually have a chance to get the right treatment early enough. And I'm quite excited about that, because these sort of smaller applications is a bit more easy to bring into the real-world application already
I think it's a super nice segue, and also sort of, you know, this long vision of making one drug, but sort of taking 10 years, maybe with AI now 5 years or so. I think sort of augmenting it with also, maybe also for maybe startup medtech, maybe more accessible algorithmic or diagnostic part. I think it is fascinating, and I think will have a major impact on the dailies that we just talked about, right, on the life-adjusted burden. So finally, Simon, now we're going to get, I don't want to say crazy, but initially, man, this sounds esoteric. This guy is developing brain-computer interfaces. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. Some say he's doing the German neural link. So basically, you want to get chips in all of our heads, right? Is that what I got from that?
I would say that would help, but I'm not sure we'll get there very soon. But, so I'm a physician by training, and I think I have one of the best jobs that might not get me. AI might not get rid of me so quickly, because in fact I get to sit next to the people and to comfort people who in fact have disorders. My specialty is the brain, so I'm a neurologist, and I get to comfort people and to take them through their disease, and I get to use AI to get them through their disease and to help them get better. And this is what Fabian was alluding to. I think we've reached an inflection point now where, as you were saying, machine learning used to be telling us a little bit about how things might connect, but with the large language models, we've now reached a stage where the tools are good enough to replace possibly brain functions that have been lost, and also to use them in the full loop to investigate how the brain works. So the frontier is like the foundation model of the brain. That's truly what makes us very human. That's what we're working on.
And this is already looped, right? So you do basically updates all the time, right?
In fact, I'll tell you what the frontier right now is to get as much data as possible from the human brain. And you can strap EEG caps onto your scalps and read from your brain with a few electrodes. That's been the frontier so far, but that's not anymore what we're doing. We're now going straight into the brain with different disciplines, colleagues from neurosurgery, we need neurologists, we need AI experts, we need engineers, we have colleagues from engineering, robotics as well. And we get right to where electrical activity in your brain gets produced, which is below your scalp, below the bone, right into the brain, and we insert electrodes there where we can measure electrical activity. And AI helps us to reconstruct the intentions of these participants. Imagine you can't move your arms or legs anymore. Or imagine you've had a stroke and cannot produce language anymore. You cannot communicate anymore. That deeply affects these people. And what AI is doing for us right now is reconstructing these intentions of these poor people, if you want, giving them back either via engineering mechanisms, that could be hardware devices, assistive devices that can instantiate movement again, so you can actually get your toothbrush back to your mouth if you are paralyzed. Or, let me finish this just one moment, so if you have a problem of producing language and speech, you might be able to use a speech computer that can reconstruct what you want to communicate to your fellow human beings. And that affects me very deeply. This is the real impact that we're seeing of AI, that all you guys have been developing also on a technical side, using for these clinical applications, diagnostic applications. I can see every day how AI is hitting people in a very positive way, and it's truly transforming lives. That deeply affects me.
I find it super fascinating. My former life, like 15 years or whatever ago, worked on neuroscience, and BCI was like these brain computer interfaces were around, but essentially with some error they could tell you go left or right or something like that. And now you're synthesizing speech, right? So I think we saw very nicely this transition from, I think, basically all of us doing some type of data analytics with sort of more classic tools, now with these modern transformer-based super beasts, right, that has been really speeding up, I think, across all of these levels things. So, you know, we are here in the BAIOSPHERE session, so maybe those last 5 minutes, let's maybe first be appreciative and impressed what kind of cool science is happening here in Bavaria and also in the Bay Area.
A little bit.
But in particular, ask ourselves now, you know, we want to go out of this with some sort of action items, right? So what do you guys think is the next thing in your particular field? And this is maybe then our final brief round. What you really want to push, what you want to maybe do yourself in your organization, maybe with partners, in your case, maybe clinical, academic, Cyriac, in your case, like always sort of bridging already the European and US case. So what would be those action items? Maybe we sort of go the inverse route if that is okay.
Yeah.
So Simon.
It's a very easy question for me. It's responsible AI. If you work with data that is as sensitive as thoughts, it's very clear that what we decode there, what we extract from human brains to reconstruct movement, communication signals, has to be treated with utmost respect, just as we treat our patients with utmost respect. So being able to acquire that data, store it, process it, analyze it, and to share it, of course, for foundation models, that has to be done in a way that is completely ethically sound, and we have a lot of collaborators. This is great about BAIOSPHERE. All of the Bavarian environment, we have colleagues from ethics, social sciences that work together with us, and making sure that the personal integrity and privacy of every single fantastic human individual is maintained at every single step. That is, as much as I value AI and can see how this is exploding, if we just push on the technological side and do not push on the human, the ethical side, we will be busted. This is something that I'm driving heavily for. Yes.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah. The ethical part, absolutely important. Anna.
Yes, absolutely. Fully agree with the ethical part. Maybe for us, one really big shift for healthcare in general is we need to empower the patients more. We want to bring the data more to the patients, and that only works actually with AI because you need something to interpret and give some guidance. And for example, you mentioned diabetes. This is where we see it already happening. So we can give patients little AI tools that they can use to see what will my glucose levels look like over the night. Do I have to eat more, less, do inject more, less, whatever? And I do think this is going to come for other indications as well. And actually, I want it. I want all my data, everything there, and have the little AI help me manage my own health.
Yeah, I don't want to have it on a CD-ROM as I got it last time from my clinics. That sounds better.
No.
Cyriac, last time we discussed, you had a whole Frankfurter Allgemeine article as preparation and call to arms. What do you have for us now?
Well, I think for all of us, I hope that Earli will be in the clinic in 18 months from now.
Awesome.
We want to get into humans and prove that this works really well. We've done mice, we've done monkeys, we've done mini pigs. It's time for humans.
The clinical trial starting in...
Yeah, and we're raising another round this year to get into the clinic. Now, but on a larger scale, I'd like to say this. My dream is that we're going from the nucleus, where we currently are, to the cell, and then to the organ, and then to the whole body, understanding how the cell works, how the nucleus works, how the tissue, the organ, and finally how the organs work together and create a completely digital model of a human being. Why is that so relevant? It is probably the most complex system that you can possibly imagine. It took about 4 billion years to develop, and it's full of idiosyncrasies that probably wouldn't be designed in it if you started from scratch on a whiteboard, but that's how it is. So we got to understand it because we don't. We are at a very, very early stage. We know the alphabet of life. It has 4 letters. They keep permutating. It's called the genome. And otherwise, we have no clue what the language of life is. We don't know the words. We don't know the grammar. We can't read a paragraph. We can't read a chapter of the book. And we certainly can't read the whole book. But slowly, but surely, that huge book's like having a huge book of hieroglyphs. And you can see the hieroglyphs, but you don't know what they mean. And slowly but surely, with the help of AI, we might understand a word here, a word there. And maybe one day a paragraph, and then a chapter, and then the book. And the interesting thing is, once we know how to read the book, you know what's going to happen next, right? We don't only know how to read, we already know how to write. It's called CRISPR. And that means our responsibility as humans will rise ever more to the point where we need to decide which new books of life we are going to write, not just read.
Awesome.
And one last point. Do you know what the biggest part of the cost is in any drug development of $2.5 billion? It's the clinical trials. And they also take the most time away from patients to get the new drugs. Do you know how many drugs probably fail just because the trial was set up wrong? A lot of them. That means they never help patients. So what can we do? Imagine you have a digital model of a human. One day, this is probably going to be 15, 20 years out, you're going to run not a phase 1 with 15 people and one with 50 and then with 300. You're going to run a phase 3 with 1,000 or 10,000 patients. They're all digital. You're going to press the button. 5 minutes later, you get the results of the phase 3 trial. Didn't work. The AI is going to make you recommendations what to do better. You alter the drug. The drug is also digital. You put it back in, run another phase 3 trial. It takes another 5 minutes. And after about 2 weeks, you've run about 100 phase 3 trials. And then, when it's perfect, you dose the first real patient. That patient has a 99.9% chance of responding. And then you go to FDA approval, and off you are to the races helping people. That's my dream.
Thanks, Cyriac. This is fantastic. Virtual human, digital organism. And a really nice call to arms also on the science side. Love it. Last but definitely not least, and shortly, Petra.
Very short. There's not much that I can add to that because you have comprehensively covered what AI can do in medicine, but it can also do more. And as I said, I'm interested in proteins, so we want to shortcut the problem-solving abilities of life. Everything that life can do, and life can do amazing things. It can produce sustainable energy. It can produce materials that can be degraded and reused. We would like to learn that, and in order to do that, we need proteins. We need better proteins, and we need them faster than evolution can deliver it. And for that, designing proteins is our best bet.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Petra. Guys, this was really... Thank you very much. That was, I would say, a whirlwind tour across the scales of biology and medicine. I would even call it wild, and a jungle that we want to sort of cut through. I think in this fast-moving field, I think what we saw is that AI is not just the language for describing biology and its perturbation medicine, but it's also a language that helps us connect across those very different fields, from physicians to engineers and business scientists to deep pharma and biochemistry. And I think this language models at the end help us is already something that we're very much developing here in Bavaria. I think we're well positioned to really not just help our ecosystem, but really do stuff, important stuff for the benefits of the patients and society. Please give a warm hand for our panel, and thank you again for listening.